2016, when we started CRD, we tried to have a Chiefs Day to kind of go along with the modern deal of they have President's Day on Monday. So we want to have since we have our own nation, we want to have a Chiefs Day. So this is probably our third time having a Chiefs Day today instead of Monday. We kind of want to have a day off. So we have a schedule for then. We have tonight during our cultural day. So with that, we had a meal the last few times, but we have a meal here in just a minute. But this is a Chiefs Day. The chief we picked today was a guy named, I hope I spelled it right, Lesado Ditawaha, or Skychief. This guy here, he was, as far as I know, he was Ikahaki. And then we researched about it. He had some of his folks. I don't know if anybody come from him, but I think we started finding out. I think just today that maybe he does have some relatives. But I know for sure he had a brother, and his name was Curly Chief. And then Curly Chief that come off these folks here, and then the folks here through your grandmother, I guess. And so with that, I will give you guys a little bit of time, maybe Francis, maybe you can be your spokesman, or you guys can. Just tell us what you know about they don't have to be a long 20 minutes. I think it could be 2 or 3 minutes or whatever. What you all know about Skychief and your connection to them, to you guys. That's you all descend from him. So he's one of your ancestors. So, anybody?
Really, my dad didn't talk much about our history.
It's on.
Well, at least to me, he didn't talk about our family history. All he said was that we had a Curly Chief. You know, he didn't even say we just had to assume it was grandma's relative because he didn't expand on that. He might have to other family members, but not to me. But Curly Chief, and he never did mention his background. And we were told that Grandpa Harold Curly Chief, is that right? Yeah. Was Grandma's brother, and he had one brother, Robert Curly Chief. One son, and Robert had a daughter, I believe. I don't know more about that. That's all we know is because he wore a red shirt in battle.
All right. Well, it's your lucky night because Mr. Eckhawk and Mr. Squatter Horsey here, they give you a lot of history. This is your lucky night. You can all He's supposed to be on his way. Okay? We never know. That's all my guess. But so welcome everybody. We're about to get started. Our food is ready, and I know maybe my wife and maybe Martha can help serve it out. But I'm going to say a blessing, and then y'all just, whoever wants to, can start the line. You don't have to be kind of through age or through height or whatever, or through band or whatever, however you want it. Whoever the hungry is, I guess, put in line first. So, with that, I'm going to and return thanks, and we'll get started. And while we're doing it, I think nephew has some pictures of honoring here at the Sado Tito Walnut. Spell it best I could. I know our language right now. Yeah. I can spell it however I want. All right, well, with that, I'm going to return thanks to you. Mighty God, thankful for today, that we Father, this wintertime season we have, Heavenly Father, that we can gather as a Pawnee Nation here, Mighty God, and set aside some time to remember our old folks here, Mighty God. We've been thinking about this old ancestor of ours here, God. This Tito Walcott, God, made a real strong name for himself here years ago in our days when we roamed in Nebraska and that area. God. So thankful for what he did for our folks, like that, the man he was, and all the leadership qualities he had, and everything that went along with his life. We're going to hear some more about tonight. Then come down to, we even have some folks here tonight that got some of his descendants like that. So I'm thankful for everybody here, dear God, tonight. I'm thankful for our tribe, the rest of our tribe, our different meetings we have going on tonight, dear Father, that we have, and as all of us, from the youngest to the oldest, each band like that, each home like that, dear God. And bless this food. I'm glad that we can, our little department here can get some food together for our community, whoever wants to come and eat. So I ask you to bless this food here that comes from our own enterprise like that, down in Haller. I ask that you be with us tonight and on to the days to come. Approaching the new year here, springtime like that. So you be with us here, dear God, our Cultural Resource Division, all the departments we have under us, dear God, come the best we can for our folks. I'm asking all this down in the name of my Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen and amen. All right. So, like I said, whoever wants to get in line first, go ahead. I want to be the last one. So.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you all for being here this evening time. A few years back, when I was on council, we had talked about having President's Day, that everybody's off. And we had talked about not really going along with President's Day, that we should do something that would be more towards us. And then so I'd come up with the idea about Chief's Day. So on that day, instead of discussing past U.S. presidents, let's talk about our past chiefs or our past prominent people that we had. That was a kind of a reflection of who we are today. So we started this Chiefs Day. So this year we decided to incorporate it with the culture class tonight because we all know how we like to have the day off too as well. So we've been in the past. I think we've been doing it on like at noon of President's Day. So so we decided to incorporate it in here this evening time. So I'm thankful that you guys come out here today. And so one of the persons that we decided to talk about tonight was Skychief. He was a very prominent figure amongst our bands of Pawnees, not just the Kitkahawkees, but all other bands as well. He was highly feared by a lot of other tribes. He was also, he made a lot of other tribes mad, just the warfare that he had. But one of the things that Matt Reed and myself was discussing about is that in his lifetime, at a young age, I don't know what the life expectancy was of people within that time frame, but for him, he was a chief amongst the Kitkahawkees for quite a few years, and we and Walter might be able to talk more on it than I can, but easily he had to have been a chief around for 30 years. Probably more than that, but more specifically, we don't know. So I think if some of you people know a little bit of the history, that he was killed at the Massacre Canyon. So I don't know if they knew for sure the exact age he was, but he was in the upper 60s, I believe, maybe 60, 65 range. But he was a very notable warrior, a very notable chief, and some of the characteristics that you would think about as far as that you would want in a leader. These were some of the things that he showed in himself and his leadership. He led a lot of war parties. He led the band in hunting campaigns. He disciplined people accordingly. Some of the accounts that we had read that he was a pretty stern person. And I think given in that era and that time, that's how a lot of our people were. But up to the very day that he was killed, he showed what it meant to be a leader as a chief. You know, he knew he was going to be killed, and he gave his life in hopes that he could kind of hold off them Sioux while the attack started. He's seen the numbers. He's seen the numbers that were coming in, and he had made some, comments about what was about to happen and the things that he had done leading up to his end. And I'm assuming that Walter would be able to kind of talk more about that as well. But also too, within the Kansas history, within that Kansas area was old Kickahocky village sites, but it was also part of our old hunting trails. So when we would move around in the Republican River Valley areas, we would move around within that western Kansas area. And we would work ourselves back up in the southwestern part of Nebraska, and then make our way back to the northern part. But there's a place around western Kansas called Smith Center, Kansas. And there's a camping spot there that our hunting parties would camp at. Spend several days there, and they would go scout out the Republican valleys around there, and they would hunt buffalo. One year, I don't know exact dates, sorry about that, but one year we had a big battle with Cheyennes. It wasn't real big, but where my brother and I's namesake come from is where this battle took place. And we had killed a notable Cheyenne there. And so the following year, in retaliation, the Cheyennes, there was Apaches, Sioux, Arapahoes, a lot of them, they had this huge war party, and they came to seek revenge on the Kickahokies for that, for killing that Cheyenne man. And in that time frame, Skychief was one of the, of course, was the leader of that hunting party. And he had been a little further north. He had some relations with the Potawatomis that he had made. And from there, he was able to, he had seen this large war party that was taking place. And he was able to get the Potawatomis at that time who had some brand new guns. And he was able to get them, and they came over and they turned the tides, and then we won that battle. And I know for sure that Walter will talk more about that specifically. So I'm setting him up. He's sitting back there and stuff. So I'm setting him up for all these different stories and stuff. But what I have here is a few pictures that we have. This is him over here on the far side right here. And these are his brothers. These right here for sure. Now you probably seen this collared shirt and thinking, well, that's a woman. But at the time, these were some of the shirts that the clothing that was given to Pawnees. And so amongst Pawnees at the time, that was kind of the thing, was to have one of those shirts that had the ruffles. You know, we didn't know that there were women's shirts or whatever back in the day. So that's Skychief right here. Now, as far as his who's who on there, I don't know, and I was trying to find this picture of him. You'll see another picture here coming up. This is kind of a famous picture that a lot of people see. So this is Skychief on the end, and these are his brothers. We think this one's Curly Chief. Is that right? Yes. Okay, so that's Curly right there. And we couldn't figure out these other ones' names. One of them has something to do with a knight. We don't know what. It's Night Chief or something. But something that had to do with night. Not Night Chief? Yeah, Night Chief. And what about the other one? Night. Yeah, Night. Do you remember the other ones?
No, I don't have that second one.
Yeah. So these were the brothers, and this was the Pawnee here, the Hale. He was also an interpreter and was in a lot of campaigns with them. But this was a picture that was taken. And You guys note this bear claw necklace here. I'm going to talk about that here in a little bit. These are some more of his brothers. This might have been taken at the same time as the other pictures. There's another, more of a better picture of the studio where you can see where they had it set up. This is him right here in his scout military coat. And this is another picture, and I'm not sure, I think this is him right here. But this is him and his brothers. Same ones. We're back to that. So this bear claw necklace, at the start of the battle, Master King, and actually Uncle Herbie, he found a story today in one of the books that kind of give a detailed message. A detailed account of what happened. Mine that I'm going on is more oral, kind of like what people were telling me growing up. But at the beginning of the battle, Skychief took that bear claw necklace off and he gave it to one of his brothers. And he told one of his brothers, "I'm going to die here today. So take this bear claw necklace." And he gave that to Curly. Is that right? No. Dog Chief. Okay, Dog Chief. So he gave that to one of his brothers and said, "I'm going to die here today. Don't let the Sioux get this." And then he went on, and then he gave his life. And he was probably the first loss that was encountered, and that kind of started the whole war. So through that time, this bear claw necklace now sits in the Denver Art Museum. And so I've got a little video here, and I'm going to play this for you. And you will be able to kind of hear a little more about the history that goes along with it. If ever that time comes, we ever get our own museum, we will be able to get that bear claw necklace, get it on loan so that everybody can see that. So at this time, turn this over to Atiwa Chittick's here.
To be with you, I feel like it's very fitting that the Pawnee Nation honor its chiefs. On President's Day, we honor our own chiefs, because historically, from time immemorial, our Pawnee bands, were ruled by our chiefs. They led us through times of peace. They led us through times of war. They led us through our treaties. They negotiated these treaties. They led us through times of hardship, starvation years. And I think that we're here today as descendants only because of these chiefs that we're honoring and remembering. And even though the United States government and the Indian agents at the turn of the century, tried to undermine the power of our traditional leaders, our chiefs, the people still remembered the Pawnee chiefs, when we formed our Constitution in the year 1934 or 35. And they wrote the chiefs into the Pawnee Nation's Constitution. And that makes our form of government very, very unique in that we have an elected business council, which is composed of our political leaders. But we also have our Chiefs Council, or the Cheryl Council, which is elected by the bands as our traditional leaders. And they're given certain powers under the Constitution, to review acts of the Business Council as it relates to the treaties that their predecessor chiefs had negotiated. And so it's very fitting that we, exalt and remember our chiefs, and even including the ones that we have today on our Chiefs Council. Because all of those men on the Chiefs Council are very respected men. And so I wanted to share some remarks about Skychief, and I do this with respect to the Matthews family, that probably is the closest descendants, of Skychief, Curly Chief, certainly is an ancestor of your family, and I guess he was a brother of Skychief, But my Uncle Bruce, when I was a young man, my Uncle Bruce was the oldest uncle that I had. And he was born around World War I, I guess. And he was kind of a family historian. He liked to hang out with the older Pawnees, during his life. And he learned a lot about our people. And he said that on Skychief, that he said that he was better known, according to Uncle Bruce, as Blue Sky Chief. Even though he's called Skychief today, that he was known among the Kitcahawkees as Blue Sky Chief. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's just what he said. He also said that he was a really tough war party leader. When they would go on the horse raiding expeditions, that the young men would clamor to go along with him. And he was very strict and on the members of the war party, that when they would come back, often they would be pursued, by enemies that they had taken their pony herd. And so if they would get kind of sleepy riding all night, he would think he's riding quirt, and whip them across their back, And so a lot of the young men would come back on his war parties, and they'd have these lashes on their back, but they brought many horses back, and so every time he would go out, everyone wanted to go with him because they knew that they were going to bring back a lot of horses, So he was a tough war party leader, I guess you might say. So I want to share just a few stories, many of which Adrian has already said. Forgive me if I repeat them, but I had occasion, as many of you know, to write a book about the history of the Echohawk family, 10 generations. And I had to do a lot of research, about the Pawnee people in doing that book. And a lot of it had pertained to Skychief, because he was a chief, he was a chief for well over 20 years of the Kitcahawke, from at least 1850 all the way up until the time of his death in 1873. So that's at least 23 years that we know of, and possibly more. So he was obviously very revered and exalted as a Pawnee chief, a Kitcahawke chief. In the year 1850, all of the Pawnees were living downstream from the Loup River in 2 villages. East of the animal lodge called Pahaku in the eastern part of Pawnee country. They had been pushed off of the Loup River by the Sioux and Cheyenne by 1850, and the Arapahoes and their other allies to to the eastern part into 2 villages. And one of the villages was inhabited by the Kitgahaki and Chawee, and it was ruled by Skychief for the Kitgahakis and Man Chief for the Chawees. And then the other 2 bands lived upstream a little way, so they had the 2 villages there. And in the year 1854, they lived there about 10 years. And it was a very tough time for the Pawnees. They were called like the starvation years, because we had been pushed off by overwhelming numbers of our enemies, of our beloved Loup River, and downstream and on the Platte to the pretty much the eastern edge of our homeland there, next to the Oto country, you know. And my great-grandfather Echohawk was born in the year 1854 in that village that was ruled by a Skychief. As Adrian mentioned, in the year 1852, Skychief led a summer buffalo hunt. And it was all 4 bands, and they would pick one chief to lead all 4 bands for safety and number. And they would go through the plains, you know, in 4 columns, you know, band by band, you know. And when they conducted their, this particular hunt was led by Skychief, and it just exemplifies the difficulties that the Pawnee hunters were encountering at that time, because the prairie was full of enemy tribes. And when he led them into from the Pahaku village there down to the Republican River Valley, they saw great difficulties there. They encountered battles between different tribes almost day after day. During a 12-day period, they fought 5 battles with different allied tribes. And so Skychiefs, the people under his leadership, they had to fight for their food, because these tribes were trying to prevent them from access to the buffalo herds. But on that last battle is the one in which the Cheyenne warrior, Lights on the Cloud, which we called him Iron Shirt, was killed in that last battle, you know, that they fought when they were fighting down there in the Republican Valley on that particular hunt. And he was killed. I heard 2 stories. One, he was killed by Spotted Horse Chief, and the other story was he was killed by carrying the shield in front from the Morgan family. I don't know which story is true or not, you know, I can't say, but anyway, Skychief was the leader of that particular hunt, when the people had to either fight for their food on the Buffalo Road or perish, you know, from starvation. You know, it was that difficulty. And so he was a gallant chief, you know, and he carried the troubles of his people on his shoulders, you know, like these old-time chiefs, you know. They had chiefly ways, you know. They put the welfare of the people before their own, and they watched out for all of the people, from the oldest to the youngest, you know. And they led us through these times of great difficulty, and Skychief was one of them. And that particular hunt, you know, it illustrates, you know, the kind of the burdens that he carried. And then 1 year later, again on a buffalo hunt, as Adrian had mentioned, the 4 bands had went on a buffalo hunt in search of food for the people, and they had a successful hunt. And then on the way home, the 4 bands scattered, you know, and each hunted their way home. Well, Skychief led the Kitgahakis back. And that was when they, along the Republican River Valley, as Adrian said, they were hunting with some Potawatomi friends from Kansas. And Skychief was personal friends, you know, with their chief. And so they lingered in this beloved Republican River Valley and hunted. And while they were hunting, the Potawatomi chief wanted to make a horse trade with Skychief because he admired this spotted mule that Skychief was riding. I guess it was a custom of a lot of our chiefs to ride mules acquired from the Spaniards, because the mules have a very comfortable riding gait. You know, they're very comfortable to ride. But he owned a spotted mule that his Potawatomi friend wanted to trade for. But he didn't want to do it, so they left and returned to Kansas that morning. And then after they had gone over the horizon, well, Skychief changed his mind and took his mule and he rode to catch him, because he was going to make that trade with his friend, you know. As he went up on the ridge, he looked over, and in the distance he saw this huge Cheyenne and Sioux and Arapaho war party with Apaches and Kiowas coming towards the Kitcahawkee camp there on the Republican River. And I guess his heart sunk, you know, because it looked like these were overwhelming odds, you know. And they were there to avenge the death of Iron Shirt the summer before, and because they were on that kind of a mission, they brought their war medicine along, their sacred arrows, their buffalo calf, buffalo hat, and they were intending to rub out the Kitcahawkees from the face of the earth, and they had enough warriors to do that among those 5 tribes, you know. So Skychief, he rode his mule through the hills at a gallop, you know, and he got a hold of his Potawatomi friends, and they returned to the scene of the battle. He said, "We need help." And by golly, those Potawatomi marksmen, they all had rifles, and they fought like European infantry, I guess. They had a firing line. I guess he brought about 20 mounted riflemen. And they would form one line with another line behind it. They would fire their muskets. And then the next line would advance and fire their muskets while the other line would reload, and they would keep doing that. And they routed that huge Cheyenne war party and saved the Kitcahawkee band, you know, from certain destruction. So all of us Kitcahawkee people today, we owe our lives to these Potawatomis that were Skychief's friends, I guess. But I think, so through that act, you know, I think he helped to save our band from certain destruction. And as nephew said, you know, he also led the last Pawnee buffalo hunt. And that was the one at Massacre Canyon, where in years past, the entire Pawnee Nation would go on the buffalo hunt. There would be 4,000 to 5,000 people. But on this one, only 400 could go, because too many people were sick. They were starving. There wasn't enough horses, so only 400 went. Of this 400, there were 250 men, and the rest were women and children. And they had a successful hunt until they were overwhelmed by this big war party, you know. And in that particular battle, I was reading the accounts of it, you know, and it said, was said that you know, Skychief, he rallied the hunters, and they formed a line, you know, and he said some encouraging words to the Pawnee warriors there. You have to stand your ground, you know, today to defend the people. You're going to be men of men today. And they were, you know, and he then signaled in sign language. He challenged the Sioux, you know, and said, you know, you killed my wife and 2 daughters in their cornfield, and I'm going to fight to the death today. And with that, you know, he took his 3-year-old son from his horse and slayed him with his knife, you know, cut his throat, rather than see that young son fall into the hands of the Pawixecut. And that's what he did, and he did fight to the death, you know, and at one point, I guess he was surrounded. And one of his brothers, Dog Chief, came to his side and said, "We better get out of here." And he said, "I can't, I'm going to stay right here. I can't run while our women and children are being killed." And so he said he took off that bear claw necklace, that like Adrian said, and gave it to Dog Chief and said, "Take this necklace, and take it out of this canyon here, because I know I'm going to die, but I don't want the Sioux to get this necklace, And so he did. He got out of there. Anyway, he died a hero's death, and just, as I say, I think it was a very chiefly thing that he did, so those I just wanted to share, and I know the family's probably got other stories, but with nephew's permission here, I wanted to render a song, on Skychief's behalf, just in closing. I want to sing that Red Shirt song that come out of the Battle of Massacre Canyon, and it relates to Curly Chief. So if we'll rise at this time, and I'll do my best, and bear with me. And we'll honor Skychief. Ede kutasutu deduk spidu, ede kutasutu deduk spidu, duk sakasi pahadu deduk spidu, ede kutasutu deduk spade yohe yohe. Ede kutasutu deduk spidu, duk sakasi pahadu deduk spidu, ede kutasutu deduk spade yohe. Ede kutasutu deduk spidu, ede kutasutu deduk spidu, duk sakasi pahadu deduk spidu, ede kutasutu deduk spade yohe yohe. Ede kutasutu deduk spidu, duk sakasi pahadu deduk spidu, ede kutasutu deduk spade yohe. Thank you.
This book that Taylor and Zach was talking about last night, that they had it downloaded. It's the Ceremonies of the South Band Part 2 by Mary and then Doug Parks. But right at the bat it says those that wore, in the old days, it said those that wore the bear claw necklace, there was a chief. There was a chief when they was in that bear society. So that was it. So you heard about Skychief, you heard he's a bad egg back then, I know the Matthews girls would probably really fight, but they could really scrap. So Cameron, it's going to be up to you to carry it on. Kung Fu guy or something one day, be a bad egg like your ancestor there. So with that, anybody have any questions? I hope I helped you folks out, because I gave them a chance to tell these stories, and they didn't have too much information. Only that is sought really through the Matthews side. It'd be their grandmother, right? And her name was Nanny, huh? Curly Chief. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's their connection. And then who was their father again? Curly Chief, or how was that again? You can explain it again, tell us, or no, Nanny Curly Chief. How did she become a Curly Chief? Was she from Curly Chief himself, or there was somebody else between there?
She was a Curly Chief. I really don't know that. I do know that Grandma attended school at Chicago, and Grandma Matthews went up there and got her. She was pretty
Yeah, that was her dad. Yeah, Curly Chief. And then Grandma had it, Burris Curly Chief.
I have a question for the girls.
All right.
Where did Burris Curly Chief come in?
That's Grandma's brother,
Annie's brother.
yeah,
God.
and Harold, Grandpa Harold.
Yeah.
So Harold and Burris and Nanny, all,
I think they had a sister.
and a sister.
Grandma had, yeah, they had another sister.
And their father was Curly Chief.
But Burris used to go to the church.
And the Curly Chief was the brother to Skychief. That's what we got. If we had anything else, we got that. We got the lineage. We got a good story from Hottie and nephew. Got pretty decent little pictures of him, you know. And so, and then his picture's back here too on that last one that says Warrior Nation. And so, if there's not any more questions.
I got those names I was gonna tell.
You got the names again.
We got the names, I was just gonna show them through the picture. So if you guys remember that picture of them four brothers with the interpreter in the back, so going from right to left. The first one was, and I was gonna guess this, and I wish I would have, so could have got some credit, but the first one's name was, he who leaves the enemy lying in the water. That was his name. The second one was, Night Chief, but what was the, his chiefly night, or it translates into night chief. And then the one who was Curly, his name was he who strikes the enemy's chief, right? Yeah, he's the one who strikes the chiefs first. That was his name. So somewhere, you know, how Curly got in there, I don't know. So maybe that was his warrior name, I guess, so to speak. And then there was Skychief. So those were the names of those four brothers. He who leaves the enemy lying in the water, his chiefly night or night chief, he who strikes the chiefs first, and then Skychief.